The medical bay hummed with alien technology as Danny Crawford sat across from the fox-like creature, who had been found drifting in a damaged escape pod 3 days ago. Her fur shimmered between copper and gold under the lights, and her large amber eyes held a depth of intelligence that made his chest ache with the need to communicate. She had been trying to speak since they brought her aboard, but no sound came from her throat, and the frustration in her expression grew darker each day. Translator device between them flickered uselessly because it needed vocal patterns to work and she had none to give. Danny had been the one to find her pod, and he had been the one sitting with her every day since then, while the rest of the crew focused on repairing the ship after the asteroid field incident. Captain Morrison had given him permission to work with her, and Dr. Helen Price had run every scan possible, but the results were always the same. The aliens' vocal cords had been damaged, beyond any medical repair they could provide, and even the advanced regeneration pods could not fix tissue that had been destroyed at the molecular level. She was a pilot from what they could understand through gestures and drawings, and her ship had been attacked by raiders who left her for dead. Now she sat in their medical bay alive but trapped in silence, and Danny could see the weight of it crushing her spirit a little more each day. He had been reading about the Viren people and their culture in the database, and he learned that for them, voice was everything. They composed songs that could last for days, and their entire history was passed down through spoken word, and to lose one's voice was considered a fate worse than death. Foxgirl, whose name sounded like Kessa when she mouthed it, had lost more than just her ability to speak. She had lost her identity and her connection to her people, and Danny could see her fading. That night he lay in his quarters staring at the ceiling and thinking about the old stories his grandmother used to tell him. Stories about trades and bargains and the things people would give up for love or duty or compassion. He thought about what it meant to help someone and what price was worth paying. Next morning he found Dr. Price in her office and asked her a question that made her face go pale. She told him it was impossible and dangerous and completely against regulations, but he insisted until she finally pulled up the research files. There was a procedure buried deep in the experimental archives that had been attempted only twice in human history. A neural transfer that could copy someone's vocal patterns and implant them into another person. But the cost was that the donor would lose their own ability to speak permanently. The technology had been banned after the second attempt because the ethical implications were too severe, but the equipment still existed in their medical bay. Dr. Price refused at first, and Danny spent 2 days convincing her, while Kessa sat alone in her room sketching pictures of her homeworld on a data pad. Finally, the doctor agreed on the condition that Danny understood there was no going back, and that he signed every waiver in the ship's database. He signed them all without reading a single word. The procedure took 4 hours, and Danny felt nothing but a strange warmth spreading through his throat, and then a coldness that settled deep in his chest. When he woke up, Dr. Price was standing over him, with tears in her eyes, and he tried to ask if it worked, but no sound came out. She nodded and pointed to the next room where Kessa was just beginning to stir. The fox girl opened her eyes slowly and touched her throat with trembling fingers. She took a breath and then another, and then she spoke. The voice that came out was Danny's voice, and it sounded strange coming from her. But the joy on her face made everything worth it. She said his name first, and then she started to cry. She tried to thank him, but the words came out in broken fragments because she was still learning how to use vocal cords again. Danny smiled at her even though he could not respond, and he wrote on a data pad that she should take her time over the next few weeks. Kessa learned to speak with increasing confidence, and she would sit with Danny for hours practicing and telling him stories about her world. She spoke about the crystal forests of her home planet and the way her people would gather under the triple moons to sing songs that made the air shimmer with color. She told him about her family and her training as a pilot, and the day the raiders came and destroyed everything she knew. She spoke, and Danny listened, and he realized that he had given her more than just a voice. He had given her back her future. The crew noticed the change in both of them, and some whispered that Danny had been foolish to give up something so precious, while others said he was the bravest person they had ever met. Captain Morrison called him to her office once and asked him if he regretted his decision. Danny wrote his answer on the datapad slowly and carefully. He told her that some things were more important than words, and that he would make the same choice again, without hesitation. The captain nodded and dismissed him, but not before he saw the respect in her eyes. Months passed, and Kessa's ship was eventually repaired with help from the crew. She prepared to leave and return to her people. But before she departed, she came to Danny one final time. She sat across from him in the observation deck where they had spent so many hours together, and she spoke to him in his voice. She told him that in her culture there was a bond formed between two souls when one gave, the other something irreplaceable. She said that he would always be part of her and that she would carry his gift with her for the rest of her life. Then she reached into her pack and pulled out a small crystal that glowed with an inner light. Explained that it was a memory stone from her homeworld and that she had recorded every conversation they ever had into its matrix. She told him that whenever he felt alone or forgotten, he could hold the stone and hear her speaking his words back. To him, he took the crystal and felt its warmth pulse against his palm. Kessa stood to leave and Danny stood with her. Before she walked away, she turned back one last time and spoke 2 words in his voice. "Thank you." The words hung in the air between them, carrying the weight of everything they meant to each other. Danny smiled and touched his throat where his voice used to live, and he knew that it had found a better home. Kessa left the ship that day, and Danny watched her vessel disappear into the stars. He returned to his duties and learned to communicate in new ways through writing and gestures and expressions. The crew adapted, and some said he had become even better at his job because he listened more carefully than anyone else at night. He would hold the memory stone and hear Kessa's voice speaking words he had once owned. He heard her laugh and sing and tell stories, and he realized that his voice had become something more beautiful than he ever could have made it alone years later. When other ships encountered Varan vessels, they would hear stories about a human who traded his voice so an alien could speak again. The story spread across the galaxy and became legend. Some said it was impossible, and others said it was the truest act of compassion they had ever heard. But Danny Crawford knew the truth. He knew that he had not lost anything. He had simply given his voice wings and let it soar among the stars.